sport. I do have a problem with assault weapons. And I grow weary of our ability to successfully move on to the next day. We'll be upset for a day or two, and then we move on. We have become somewhat desensitized to the shock and the sadness that takes over with us, and I'm hoping that we can stick with this one. See it through, push it through. In the book written by Judy Blume, An Unlikely Event, it tells the story of a young girl in Newark, New Jersey. And in the span of 3 months, there were 3 plane crashes that took the lives of a number of people. And the girl asked her mother, why would God let this happen? And as she struggles to answer the question, the mother provided a profound perspective, and she said, it's not God's desire to see these things happen. And it's not God's job to decide what happens. But you can count on the fact that God will be there to help us through it. I thought, isn't that an interesting statement? It's not God's job to decide what happens. And it's not God's desire to see these things happen. But it is God who will help us. As Isaiah, the verses from Isaiah today spoke to, I'm here, I made myself available, but no one came. And I'm always here, and I'm always available, and I'll always listen, and I'll always help you try to understand. But you have to come. So much as this mother spoke, I hope that that inspiration and support is what we need to make a difference this time, to continue to push thoughtful consideration of how we might better manage our munitions and weapons in this country to reduce things happening like what happened at the Pulse in Orlando. The other thing I think that's a little bit more unique about this, and I'm sure was not intentional, but to me is kind of a, maybe in a way, a God wink. This targeting of the LGBT community resulted in targeting a community that may be the best organized of any community at the moment in this country. It spans every state in the union. It's just come together to make changes in laws and to fight for its rights in marriage and as for health care. They're organized. Their supporters are organized with them. There's no organizing required. They're already here as a force across the country. And maybe that's what we needed. At Sandy Hook, the PTAs were not all coordinated. At the theater, all theater goers were not all coordinated. When it happens at a military base, the military just locks its fences a little tighter. But this time, a community was attacked that already has a voice, already has connections. Keeping my fingers crossed. They'll stick together, and they will continue to make sure their voice is heard. I was curious yesterday as I was finishing up my notes and preparing this, what does the support look like for the LGBT community in this country? And in 2001, the support was only 43% in support of the LGBT community. In 2015, that was 57%. In another study, it's 63%. Democratic or independents, folks who identify themselves as Democratic or independent when they vote, 60%. Those who describe themselves as liberals, 78%. Those that describe themselves as moderates, 68%. An overwhelming tide beginning to move in support. Inclusion is gaining ground. Again, my hope is that because parents and children are involved in learning how to live this way, and accepting it at an early age and moving it forward as part of the community. My millennial does not care what your sexual orientation is. She really doesn't. Nor do her friends. They don't care. They are going through life together as people who believe, for one thing, that they got to clean up the mess that the rest of us have left. Less worried about people's gender orientation, less worried about taxes, much more worried about what they're going to have to do to maintain some level of lifestyle. America has been great for over 240 years because it embraced its diversity, and hopefully we will fight for our ability to continue to support and include all who want to come and build this great country. And as God said to Isaiah, I'm here, I'm ready to be found, I've made myself available. Remember, one bad apple doesn't ruin the whole bushel. There's plenty of good apples left. And remember that God is here and God is in Orlando. And God did not plan for this to happen. This was the dark side of our own free will as humans. And even though God didn't plan this event, God is with us to help us. God brought the right people to the scene to reach the hostages, treat the injured, minimize the damage, and God will be with us in the aftermath. Last week we talked a little bit about the Old Testament and the New Testament, the dark side and the light side, the vengeful God, the God of love. But I also happen to think that the New Testament is a training manual because Jesus taught us how to love in the New Testament. God prepared us in the Old Testament. God brings us wisdom in the Old Testament, the learning of another tradition, and then Jesus shows us how to take love forward in an inclusive covenant with God and with all of God's people, because we are the children of promise. And you heard Donna read it. I've made myself available to those who bothered to ask, and to those who haven't bothered to ask. People who make wrong turns, insist on doing things their own way, people who are rude in my face, people who make up their own religions. Preserve the covenant. For those who conserve my covenant will inherit the earth. And so God is available. People's free will can get in the way. You know, the Bible and the Quran and every other holy teaching book reminds us how to care for humans. You don't have to hunt very deep in any of them, where we're reminded that concern for the world and taking care of the world is the way that we are called to live with one another in community. We're not asked to be violent. We're not asked to be robbers. We're not asked to do muggings and shootings and start wars. Yes, there are stories about that in the Bible, but the intent is to remind us that it had catastrophic results that were held on for generations. I worry about those that are among us that have only known drugs and violence, who've grown up in countries that have been at war, and all they know is violence, or that food is not ever readily available, or medical care is non-existent. Friends are hard to come by, and adults and children are constantly afraid. I've read stories this week about what it's like to live in parts of Iraq and Syria and parts of our own cities. Cities where no one should have to live. How can we expect people to live like this and come out understanding what love is? We have to think about how we behave. We need to think our way past money. We need to think our way past greed. We need to think our way past material things. And we need to place more value on diversity and celebrating our differences and inclusiveness. We need to stop being divisive. We need to come together. You hear it all the time. When you bring together diversity, you strengthen everything you're doing. And then we go out and only include those that look like us. We need to hear ourselves. We need to listen to what's being said and understand what we're supposed to do and then put it into action. And I know all of you know this. You're all involved in ministry every day of the week. That's the thing I love about this church. You do put it all into practice every week. But we need to remember that you can't cherry pick out of the Bible what you want. And if you want to cherry pick, then cherry pick the one that says judgment isn't yours, because judgment isn't ours. And we should never be cherry picking out anything that tells us to dislike anyone else. And I'm going to use the Message version of the Bible because I liked this version of Galatians. Until the time when we were mature enough. Now remember, we read out of Galatians last week, and the Apostle Paul was talking about his conversion from a persecutor of Christians to becoming a Christian. Until the time when we are mature enough to respond freely in faith to the living God, we were carefully surrounded and protected by the Mosaic law, the law that the Jewish tradition follows. The law was like those Greek tutors with which you are familiar, who escort children to school and protect them from dangers or distraction, making sure the children will really get to the place they set out to go to. But now you have arrived at your destination, and by faith in Christ you are in direct relationship with God. Your baptism in Christ was not just washing you up for a fresh start. So in other words, baptism's not just hopping in the tub, getting clean clothes on, getting ready to come out and have a nice dinner. It involved dressing you up in an adult faith wardrobe. Christ's life, the fulfillment of God's original promise. So the symbolism in baptism is we immerse you in water, or we sprinkle water on you, to symbolize going and dispersing your old self. Dying in your old self and coming back out of the water, a new person, clean, whose soul is clean and ready to put the faith and love of Jesus Christ into action. And in Christ's family, there can be no division into Jew and non-Jew, slave and free, male and female, because among us, you are all equal. That is, we are all in a common relationship with Jesus Christ. Also, since you are Christ's family, then you are Abraham's famous descendants, heirs according to the covenant promises. In other words, you are the heirs to the covenant as long as you retain that covenant we made with God to care for creation, to care for His people, to be great stewards of inclusiveness and to eliminate divisiveness. We are part of that Abrahamic family who will inherit this earth. That does not mean we inherit the earth and now we have all the money and all the property and all the resources and all the everything. That means we have all the responsibility that goes with inheriting this earth, that we are now those who will love and include everyone. We will minimize violence. We will encourage diversity. We will bring together all of God's people in the care and feeding of this earth and of God's teachings and the teachings that Jesus demonstrated in the training manual called the New Testament. It's my hope. It is my hope that we will someday get this. It is my hope that we will keep our anger burning. It is my hope that we will find out a way to convince the gun alliances and manufacturers and everyone else who makes money off guns that lives are worth more than their guns. It is my hope that we will continue to push this change. It is my hope that we will continue to speak truth to the power. It is my hope that we will have the willpower to see this through the chaos that these events create. It is my hope that we will soon realize that God's creation matters, every single piece. It is my hope that I will realize that I am an important part of God's creation and that I require care. And it is my hope that each of you and everyone I meet will remember that they require care and that each person in this room is loved and each person in this community is part of God's love. And it is my hope that you will tell those that you love them. And that you will reach out to those that you don't know yet and love them. even if that means just standing in witness, as folks did yesterday to the Westboro Church. The Westboro Church that wanted to speak and to stand against LGBT rights at the funerals of the victims of the shooting. And a fine group of Christians who get the message stood across the street. So the Westboro Baptist contingent could not see the funeral as it happened. I would stand across the street from Westboro Church. That is how I believe love is shown. You protect those who need to be protected. And it is my hope that we will continue to inch this world toward peace. A world of hope, a world of equality, a world of freedom. A world kind of like America, where we can speak truth to power. We're not perfect. We still have work to do. But we're working our way toward it. Working our way toward it creates chaos and makes things look tougher all the time. But we're making progress. 40 years ago, even as late as the late 60s, 2 races couldn't marry. Today we don't really think too much of it. It's become a normalized part of what we do. Hopefully it won't take 50 years for the inclusiveness of our LGBT friends. Hopefully we'll do it more quickly than we've done things in the past. And remember these words from Galatians chapter 3, verses 28 and 29. In Christ's family there can be no division into Jew and non-Jew, slave and free, male and female, because among us you are all equal. And that is what we are in common, is that we are all equal in our relationship with Jesus Christ. You are part of God's family, and you are part of Abraham's descendants. And if we can follow the covenant that we were called to be part of, then we will realize the world of peace and hope, love and faith that God would have us be as part of that covenant promise. So go forth and see it through, and for as Judy Bloom told us, God is there to help us through it. Amen.
Amen.